The sun had barely risen over the distant hills when Mei Ling stepped off the creaking wooden wagon. Her hands were cold, and her heart pounded with nervous excitement. After weeks at sea and days of rough travel across the prairie, she finally arrived at the small frontier town in the American West. Everything was strange and new: the wooden buildings, the dusty roads, and the wide-open fields that stretched farther than her eyes could see. She had left behind her home in southern China, a place filled with familiar smells, voices, and traditions. Now, she faced a world that was both exciting and terrifying, a world she didn't yet understand. Mei Ling's journey had not been easy. Her family had arranged for her to marry a man she had never met. It was an opportunity, they said, for a better life and safety in a foreign land. But the thought of leaving everything she knew made her feel lonely before she even arrived. On the wagon, she had spent long hours staring out at the endless prairie, clutching the small bundle of belongings she had brought with her. A few clothes, a small mirror, and a locket with a picture of her family. She had whispered prayers for courage and hoped the new life would be kind to her. As she walked into the town, a few curious eyes followed her. The townsfolk were not used to seeing women like Mei Ling. Women from faraway lands with delicate features and quiet manners. Some looked at her with suspicion, while others stared with polite curiosity. Mei Ling kept her head low, trying to blend in, yet she felt every gaze as if it weighed upon her shoulders. The language barrier made it even harder. Though she had learned a little English during the journey, speaking it was still difficult, and the local accent confused her. She longed to hear her mother's voice, to be comforted in her own language. But she reminded herself that she was here to start a new life, and there was no turning back. Her first days in the town were filled with small, exhausting tasks. She had to learn how to fetch water from the well, chop wood for the fire, and prepare meals using ingredients and methods unfamiliar to her. She felt clumsy at first, spilling water or burning rice, but she tried to do her best. Each day was a lesson in survival. Mei Ling often watched the townspeople from a distance, trying to understand their ways. Children played in the dusty streets, merchants shouted about their goods, and men rode horses with confident ease. She realized that this life demanded strength and patience. Among the townspeople was Jack, the lone rancher who lived on the outskirts. He was a man of quiet reputation. People spoke of him in hushed tones, how he had once lost his family to illness and now preferred solitude, how he could handle the wildest cattle and survive the toughest winters. Jack had lived alone for years, his only companions the animals on his ranch and the wide, open land. He noticed Mei Ling almost immediately. There was something delicate and unusual about her, a softness that contrasted with the harshness of the town. At first, he simply observed her from a distance, curious but cautious. Their first encounter was brief. Mei Ling had ventured to the edge of the town to fetch water, and Jack was there tending to his horses. Their eyes met, and Mei Ling felt a flutter of nervousness. Jack tipped his hat politely, and she curtsied slightly, unsure of how else to greet him. Words were difficult, but there was a silent understanding. Neither of them spoke much, yet both felt a small spark of connection. It was a quiet moment, unremarkable to anyone else, but significant to them. Over the following days, Mei Ling and Jack began to cross paths more often. She would see him while collecting firewood, repairing fences, or tending to livestock. Jack noticed how carefully she moved, how she tried to adapt to this new life, despite her fear and inexperience. He admired her courage. Mei Ling, on the other hand, was drawn to Jack's calm presence. He was not loud or boastful like many men in the town. There was a steadiness to him, a sense of safety that she hadn't felt since leaving home. Life in the frontier was harsh, and Mei Ling quickly learned that strength came not only from physical effort, but from inner resilience. Winters were particularly difficult. Snowstorms could last for days, covering the fields and blocking the roads. She had never seen such cold before, and the wind seemed to cut straight through her clothes. Jack noticed her struggles and, without saying much, offered small acts of kindness. He helped carry water, guided her through the snow, and shared tips on keeping warm. Mei Ling was shy at first, unsure if she could trust him. But gradually, she began to rely on his guidance. Their conversations were slow and deliberate. Mei Ling spoke in broken English, and Jack's attempts at Chinese were limited, but they found ways to communicate. Gestures, expressions, and small acts of help became their language. In these moments, Mei Ling began to feel a glimmer of hope. Perhaps this harsh, foreign land could be a place where she could belong. Perhaps there was more to life than survival, even in a place as unforgiving as the frontier. At night, Mei Ling would sit by the small stove in her room, thinking about the day and the strange mixture of fear and excitement she felt. She missed her family deeply, but she also felt a sense of pride. She was learning to navigate this new world, to stand on her own feet, and to make sense of her surroundings. Each small success, a warm meal, a task completed, a smile exchanged with Jack gave her courage to face another day. Jack, too, was changing. The loneliness that had once defined him began to lift, replaced by a quiet anticipation of seeing Mei Ling. He was careful not to intrude, not to frighten her, but he found himself making excuses to pass by her home or check on her well-being. For the first time in many years, he felt connected to another person, not just as a neighbor or a rancher, but as a man capable of caring and being cared for. One afternoon, a sudden thunderstorm hit the town. Mei Ling had been gathering herbs when the sky darkened and rain began to pour. She ran for cover, slipping in the mud, soaked to the bone. Jack happened to be nearby and offered her a blanket and shelter in his barn. Sitting together, drenched and shivering, they exchanged their first longer conversation. Mei Ling spoke about her life in China, about the family she had left behind, and about her fears for the future. Jack listened silently, offering reassurance through his calm presence and gentle words. In that moment, the barriers between them began to soften. Days turned into weeks, and Mei Ling's confidence grew. She learned to ride a horse, to care for chickens, and even to mend her own clothes. She discovered small joys in the frontier life, the golden sunsets over the hills, the quiet nights filled with stars, and the sound of wind rustling through the prairie grass. Jack became a steady companion, guiding her, protecting her, and sharing in these simple pleasures. Yet, despite the growing bond, both remained cautious. Mei Ling was aware of the social expectations that bound her, and Jack remembered the pain of past losses. They respected each other's space and feelings, careful not to rush what was slowly becoming a deep connection. Their friendship, built on trust and shared experiences, laid the foundation for something more profound, even if neither fully realized it yet. By the end of her first month in the town, Mei Ling had transformed from a frightened, uncertain girl into a young woman capable of navigating the frontier. She had faced harsh conditions, cultural barriers, and personal fears, yet she had endured and even thrived. Jack, observing her growth, felt admiration and a quiet pride. What had begun as cautious politeness between two strangers was evolving into a meaningful relationship, grounded in mutual respect and a growing emotional bond. And so, life continued in the small town. Each day brought challenges and small victories. Mei Ling and Jack moved through the frontier together, connected by unspoken understanding and the shared experience of building a life in a world far from home. They were two souls finding comfort in each other, slowly discovering that even in the harshest, most unfamiliar places, human connection could flourish. Winter had fully settled over the town, covering the ground with a thick blanket of snow. The wind howled through the streets, and the small wooden houses seemed to shiver in the cold. Mei Ling had learned to navigate the harshness of frontier life, but the biting wind and freezing temperatures made even the simplest tasks challenging. She wrapped herself tightly in layers of clothing, her small hands covered in thick gloves, and made her way to the market, hoping to buy a few necessities. Jack noticed her from a distance, his eyes following her careful steps through the snow. He had become accustomed to seeing Mei Ling around the town, but each time he saw her, he felt a strange mix of admiration and protectiveness. He adjusted his hat and mounted his horse, riding slowly toward the market under the pretense of doing errands. Deep down, he wanted to make sure she was safe, even if she did not yet realize how much he cared. At the market, Mei Ling struggled to communicate with the merchants. Her English was improving, but some words still escaped her, and accents made understanding difficult. She smiled politely and used gestures whenever needed, and some of the townspeople began to respect her patience and determination. Yet, there were whispers behind her back. Some people thought her foreignness made her weak, while others admired her courage. Mei Ling ignored the gossip, focusing instead on learning, surviving, and finding small moments of joy in a world that often felt cold and unwelcoming. Jack arrived at the market, pretending to browse goods but keeping an eye on Mei Ling. When he noticed she was having trouble with a large sack of flour, he stepped forward quietly. "Here, let me help," he said, his voice calm but firm. Mei Ling looked up, startled, and then nodded. He lifted the sack with ease and placed it on a cart nearby. She whispered a quiet, "Thank you," her accent soft and musical. Jack smiled, noticing how her gratitude was mixed with shyness. As the weeks passed, their encounters became more frequent. Jack found excuses to see her, offering help when snow blocked paths or when heavy bundles needed carrying. Mei Ling began to trust him, sensing that his intentions were kind and sincere. She started to open up more, sharing small stories about her life in China, the rice fields, the festivals, the songs her mother sang. Jack listened intently, fascinated by her experiences, which seemed so distant and different from his life on the prairie. One evening, after a long day of tending to the animals, Jack invited Mei Ling to his small cabin on the ranch. The invitation was simple, almost casual, but Mei Ling felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. She had never been inside his home before. When she stepped in, the warmth of the fire and the smell of wood soot made her feel instantly comfortable. She took off her heavy coat and gloves, feeling the cold melt away. Jack offered her tea, and they sat together, sharing stories, while the wind rattled the windows. The firelight cast shadows on the walls, and the room felt intimate in a way that surprised them both. Mei Ling felt a flutter of nervous excitement. She had grown used to Jack's presence during the day, but being alone with him in a warm, quiet space made her heart beat faster. Jack, too, felt a strange tension, a pull that he had not experienced in years. He had always been cautious with women, scarred by past losses, but Mei Ling's gentle courage and quiet strength stirred feelings he thought he had buried long ago. That night, after tea, Mei Ling helped Jack tidy up the small cabin. She moved carefully, aware of every glance and gesture. The snowstorm outside made the room feel even cozier, and for a moment, the world beyond the cabin seemed to disappear. Jack worked silently, occasionally glancing at her, noticing the delicate movements of her hands, the way her eyes reflected the firelight. Mei Ling sensed his attention, her cheeks warming slightly, but she did not look away. Instead, she focused on helping, letting the comfort of his presence calm her. As the night grew darker, they sat together near the fireplace. Mei Ling shivered slightly, still unused to the cold that had seeped into her bones. Jack noticed and offered his coat, but she shook her head. Instead, she whispered softly, almost to herself, "I'll take it off just for tonight." Her words were innocent in meaning, referring to the heavy layers of clothing she always wore to protect herself. But there was a subtle vulnerability in her tone. Jack understood immediately. He did not act rashly. He simply moved closer, sharing the warmth of the fire and offering silent reassurance. The moment passed, leaving both aware of a deepening connection. It was not just physical warmth they shared, but a comfort born of trust, understanding, and the slow building of mutual respect. Mei Ling realized that she felt safe with Jack in a way she had never felt with anyone else. Jack realized that his heart had begun to care for her beyond simple friendship. The snowstorm continued outside, but inside the cabin, a quiet peace settled over them, a sense that they were both exactly where they needed to be. In the following days, their bond grew. Jack taught Mei Ling practical skills: how to saddle a horse, mend a fence, and track the movement of cattle. She learned quickly, her determination impressive to Jack, who was used to people giving up when faced with difficulty. Mei Ling, in turn, shared knowledge of herbs and cooking techniques from her homeland, which Jack found fascinating. They exchanged more words, more laughter, and small stories of their lives. Each lesson, each shared moment, strengthened their connection. The town noticed their closeness. Some townsfolk whispered. Others stared openly. Mei Ling heard the murmurs and felt a mix of embarrassment and pride. She had grown confident enough to face the gossip, knowing that Jack would stand by her. Jack, for his part, remained calm, paying little attention to the rumors but aware that society would not easily accept their growing attachment. He respected Mei Ling's dignity and was determined to protect her from harm, both physical and social. One cold afternoon, a rider arrived at the town with news of a cattle theft from a neighboring ranch. Jack quickly saddled his horse and prepared to investigate. Mei Ling insisted on accompanying him, despite his initial protests. "You will stay here," he said, worry lining his face. But Mei Ling's eyes reflected determination, and Jack could not refuse. Together, they rode through the snow-covered plains, facing biting wind and dangerous conditions. The experience tested their endurance and trust, forcing them to rely on each other in ways neither had expected. During the journey, Mei Ling proved her courage. She remained calm in the face of challenges, following Jack's instructions and offering insight when needed. Jack was impressed by her bravery and intelligence. By the time they tracked down the stolen cattle and returned them safely, a deeper bond had formed. They had faced adversity together, learning that their connection was not only emotional but built on trust, cooperation, and shared experience. Back in the cabin that evening, they rested by the fire, exhausted but satisfied. Mei Ling prepared a simple meal, and Jack watched her with a quiet admiration. He noticed the small details, the way she concentrated while cooking, the gentle gestures she made when serving food, the warmth that seemed to radiate from her despite the cold outside. Mei Ling looked at him and felt a sense of belonging she had not known before. For the first time, she realized that this distant land, harsh and unforgiving as it was, could feel like home when shared with someone who truly cared. The snowstorm continued for days, keeping them close to the cabin. They passed the time sharing stories, playing small games, and teaching each other skills. Mei Ling's English improved rapidly, and Jack's knowledge of Chinese words grew. The more they learned about each other, the deeper their understanding and respect became. By the end of the storm, they were no longer simply two people navigating a harsh frontier. They were companions, confidants, and slowly, two hearts, quietly intertwined. One night, as they sat together by the fire, Mei Ling looked into Jack's eyes and saw something she had never expected. Gentle warmth, admiration, and an unspoken promise of care. Jack looked at her, seeing courage, intelligence, and a delicate strength that reminded him of everything he had lost and hoped to find again. The room was quiet, save for the crackling fire, and for a moment, words were unnecessary. They understood each other in ways that went beyond language, culture, or experience. And so, life continued in the small cabin during the long winter. Each day brought new challenges, but also small joys. Mei Ling and Jack learned to face hardships together, discovering that the frontier could be harsh, but love, respect, and companionship could make even the coldest nights bearable. Their bond, built slowly through trust, shared experiences, and quiet understanding, continued to grow, laying the foundation for something neither had fully realized yet, a connection that could withstand the trials of life in a strange and often unforgiving land. Spring arrived slowly in the frontier town. The snow melted into muddy streets, and the air carried the faint scent of wildflowers and fresh grass. Mei Ling felt a sense of relief at the warmer weather. Life had been harsh during the winter, and the long, cold nights had tested her endurance. Yet, she had grown stronger and more confident through the challenges. Jack had been a steady presence through it all, helping her adjust, teaching her skills, and sharing moments of quiet comfort. Their bond had deepened, though neither of them had spoken openly about their feelings. The town, however, had begun to notice them more closely. Whispers followed Mei Ling as she walked through the streets, and some townsfolk openly questioned the propriety of her closeness with Jack. "She spends too much time with him," some would say. "It's not right for a woman like her to be so familiar with a man in town." Mei Ling tried to ignore the gossip, focusing on her work and learning. She reminded herself that Jack's presence was a comfort and that the world's opinions could not define her worth. Jack, meanwhile, remained calm on the surface, but he felt a growing tension in the town. He knew the whispers could become dangerous if they escalated. One afternoon, a messenger arrived from a neighboring ranch, bringing troubling news. A herd of cattle had gone missing, and the neighboring rancher suspected thieves from another region. Jack, experienced in dealing with such situations, immediately saddled his horse. Mei Ling, despite the risks, insisted on accompanying him. Jack hesitated at first, worried for her safety, but he also understood her determination. She had proven herself capable and brave, and he respected her choice. Together, they set off across the rolling plains, facing wind, uneven ground, and the uncertainty of what awaited them. The journey was grueling. The prairie seemed endless, and the sun beat down relentlessly. Mei Ling felt fatigue in her muscles and heat on her skin, but she kept going. Jack noticed her endurance and resilience and felt a mix of admiration and concern. At times, he would slow his pace, ensuring she was keeping up, and offered words of encouragement. "We'll get through this," he said, his voice calm and steady. Mei Ling nodded, drawing strength from his presence. Together, they navigated the rugged terrain, their partnership growing stronger with each obstacle. By the second day, they discovered tracks leading toward a nearby canyon. Jack studied the ground carefully, noting the prints and direction. Mei Ling, observing closely, began to recognize patterns he pointed out. "Footprints this way," she said quietly, pointing to a faint trail. Jack looked at her with surprise and pride. She was learning quickly, not just following his instructions but thinking alongside him. Their teamwork became seamless, a silent communication built on trust and shared experience. As they approached the canyon, they noticed the stolen cattle grazing near a hidden stream. The thieves were nowhere in sight, giving Jack and Mei Ling a moment to plan. Jack dismounted and whispered instructions. Mei Ling listened intently, understanding not only the words but the strategy behind them. Together, they approached the herd cautiously, using the terrain for cover and moving slowly to avoid startling the cattle. The tension was palpable, but their mutual focus and cooperation allowed them to recover the animals without confrontation. Returning to the town with the recovered herd, Mei Ling and Jack felt a mix of relief and pride. The townspeople greeted them with surprise and admiration. Some whispered approvingly, recognizing Mei Ling's courage and Jack's leadership. Yet, not everyone was pleased. A few townsfolk expressed disapproval, questioning why Mei Ling had taken such risks. She met their stares with quiet dignity, refusing to be shamed for her bravery. Jack stood beside her silently, offering his unspoken support. Their shared experience had solidified their trust and connection, proving that they could face challenges together. The following weeks were filled with the ordinary rhythms of frontier life. Mei Ling continued to learn and grow, becoming more confident in her abilities and understanding of the town. She mended fences, tended animals, and assisted in daily chores, gaining the respect of those who had once doubted her. Jack watched her with admiration, his feelings deepening quietly. He realized that his concern for her went beyond friendship, though he struggled to find the right moment to express it. Mei Ling, too, began to feel a shift in her emotions. The admiration she once felt for Jack's skills had grown into something warmer, more personal. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Jack invited Mei Ling to take a walk along the outskirts of the town. The air was crisp, filled with the scent of blooming flowers and fresh grass. As they walked, Jack shared stories of his past, the hardships he had faced, the family he had lost, and the years he had spent alone. Mei Ling listened, her heart swelling with empathy. She realized that beneath his stoic exterior was a man shaped by pain, yet capable of deep compassion. Mei Ling, in turn, spoke of her dreams and fears. She shared memories of her homeland, the traditions she cherished, and the longing she felt for family left behind. Jack listened with genuine interest, fascinated by her experiences and resilience. In that moment, the walls both had built around themselves began to crumble. They discovered that their shared vulnerability created a bond stronger than they had anticipated. Days later, Jack and Mei Ling faced another challenge, an outbreak of illness among the town's livestock. Many animals fell sick, threatening the livelihoods of local ranchers. Jack worked tirelessly, moving between his own ranch and the town's farms, while Mei Ling assisted in tending the animals, applying remedies she had learned from her homeland. Their teamwork drew admiration from the town, but also increased the scrutiny from those who still questioned their closeness. Despite the pressures, they remained focused on the task, their respect and reliance on each other deepening with every passing day. One night, after a long day caring for the animals, Mei Ling and Jack sat together outside the cabin, watching the stars appear one by one in the darkening sky. The world felt quiet and still, and for a moment, the worries and judgments of the town faded. Mei Ling leaned slightly toward Jack, feeling comforted by his presence. Jack, noticing her proximity, felt a wave of emotion he had long kept suppressed. Words were unnecessary. Their shared silence spoke volumes about trust, connection, and the growing affection between them. As the days turned into weeks, the townspeople continued to watch them, some with admiration, others with suspicion. Mei Ling and Jack navigated the delicate balance of friendship, duty, and growing emotion. They were aware of the challenges that lay ahead, the societal expectations, the prejudices, and the uncertainties of life in the frontier, but they had also discovered the strength of their bond. Each challenge they faced together reinforced their reliance on one another, their mutual respect, and the quiet love that was beginning to bloom. A turning point came when a local festival was announced, a rare occasion of celebration in the small town. Mei Ling and Jack decided to attend, navigating the crowded streets filled with music, laughter, and dancing. For Mei Ling, it was a new experience, one that brought joy and excitement. She watched children play, merchants display their goods, and townsfolk celebrate the changing seasons. Jack stayed close, guiding her gently through the crowd, ensuring she felt safe and included. During the festival, they found a quiet moment by a lantern-lit path. Mei Ling looked at Jack, her eyes reflecting the soft glow of the lights. She felt a warmth in her chest, a mix of gratitude, admiration, and something deeper she could not yet name. Jack met her gaze, his own feelings mirrored in the depth of his eyes. The moment was fleeting, yet it held the weight of unspoken emotions, a connection that neither could ignore. The following weeks tested them further. A neighboring rancher accused Jack of misconduct, claiming he had interfered with livestock that did not belong to him. The town buzzed with speculation, and for the first time, Jack faced public scrutiny. Mei Ling stood by him quietly, offering support and reassurance. Her presence gave him strength, reminding him that he was not alone. Together, they navigated the accusations, presenting facts and maintaining dignity. Their unity impressed many in the town and further solidified their bond. By the end of the spring, Mei Ling and Jack had weathered trials both ordinary and extraordinary. They had faced natural challenges, societal scrutiny, and personal fears. Yet their connection had only grown stronger. They understood each other in ways that transcended words and culture. Trust, respect, and affection had woven a bond that neither could deny. The journey ahead remained uncertain, but they had discovered that together, they could face anything the frontier and life itself might bring. Summer had arrived in the small frontier town, and the land was alive with green fields, blooming flowers, and the warm glow of the sun. The hardships of winter and the uncertainties of spring seemed distant now, though their memories remained vivid. Mei Ling and Jack had grown closer through every challenge, their bond stronger than ever. Yet, even in the warmth of summer, life on the frontier demanded resilience, and they both understood that new trials could appear at any moment. The town had begun to accept Mei Ling more fully. Her bravery during the winter storms, her role in recovering stolen cattle, and her efforts to help tend sick animals had earned the respect of many townsfolk. Some who had once whispered behind her back now offered smiles and nods of acknowledgement. Jack had noticed this shift and felt a quiet relief. He knew that acceptance was slow, especially for someone like Mei Ling, who came from a different land and culture. Still, he admired how she faced each day with courage and dignity. One morning, Jack invited Mei Ling to accompany him on a ride across the open prairie. The sun was warm on their faces, and the wind carried the fresh scent of grass and wildflowers. Mei Ling rode confidently, her hands steady on the reins. She had learned so much since arriving in the town, and her confidence shone in every movement. Jack rode beside her, quietly proud of her progress. The vast, open land stretched before them, a symbol of freedom and possibility. For Mei Ling, the prairie was no longer intimidating. It was a place where she could belong. A place where she and Jack could share their lives. As they rode, they came across a small herd of wild horses grazing near a stream. Mei Ling's eyes lit up with wonder. "They are beautiful," she whispered, her voice filled with awe. Jack nodded, sharing in her appreciation. They watched in silence, feeling a sense of peace in the quiet moment. It was in these small, shared experiences that their connection deepened, not through grand gestures, but through understanding, companionship, and a mutual appreciation for the world around them. Returning to the ranch, they found that the town had prepared a small celebration to honor the completion of the harvest season. It was a rare occasion for the frontier town. A time for music, dancing, and community gathering. Mei Ling felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. Festivals were not a part of her daily life, but she welcomed the chance to experience joy and connection with others. Jack stayed close, offering reassurance and guidance, helping her navigate the crowded streets filled with laughter and music. During the celebration, they found a quiet corner away from the bustle. Mei Ling looked at Jack, her eyes reflecting the flickering lantern lights. She felt a warmth she had never known in her life, the comfort of being understood, the joy of sharing her experiences, and the quiet happiness of having someone beside her who truly cared. Jack looked at her with a similar feeling, realizing that his love for Mei Ling had grown beyond quiet admiration into something deep and enduring. The moment was simple, yet filled with the weight of emotions neither had fully expressed. Life, however, was not without its challenges. A sudden illness struck one of the town's children, causing fear and worry among the townsfolk. Jack and Mei Ling worked together, using their knowledge and experience to help care for the child. Mei Ling applied remedies she had learned from her homeland, while Jack provided strength and guidance in tending to the child's needs. Their efforts were tireless, and their teamwork seamless. Through this trial, their bond became even stronger, founded not only on affection but on shared responsibility and care for others. As the summer days continued, Jack and Mei Ling found moments of quiet intimacy amid the demands of frontier life. They would sit together by the river, watching the water flow, or work side by side in the fields, exchanging small smiles and gentle words. Each gesture, no matter how minor, strengthened the trust and affection between them. Mei Ling began to feel a sense of belonging that she had never imagined possible. The fear and uncertainty she had carried from her homeland were slowly replaced by comfort and love. One evening, as the sun set in brilliant shades of orange and pink, Jack and Mei Ling stood on a small hill overlooking the town. The view stretched for miles. Fields and hills bathed in the golden light. Mei Ling turned to Jack, her heart full of emotions she could no longer contain. "I feel safe here," she whispered, her voice soft but steady. "With you, I feel like I belong." Jack took her hand gently, feeling a surge of emotion. He had long known he cared for her, but hearing her words gave him the courage to express his own feelings. "You belong here, Mei Ling. With me, with the town, and with this life. I want us to face everything together." Their hearts connected in that moment, not with grand gestures, but with honesty, trust, and the quiet power of shared understanding. They embraced, feeling the warmth of each other's presence, the culmination of months of shared trials, lessons, and growing love. The prairie around them seemed to echo their emotions, the wind carrying a sense of freedom and possibility. For the first time, both felt that the future, though uncertain, could be faced together. The townspeople gradually came to accept their partnership. Stories of Mei Ling's courage and Jack's steadfastness circulated, turning whispers into admiration. She was no longer just the foreign bride who had arrived timid and uncertain. She was a respected member of the community. Jack's reputation as a capable and kind rancher grew alongside hers, and together, they became a symbol of strength, partnership, and resilience. The town, once skeptical of their closeness, began to celebrate the bond that had formed between them. Despite societal expectations and past hardships, Mei Ling and Jack built a life together on the ranch. They worked side by side, tending animals, maintaining the land, and facing each challenge as a team. The harshness of the frontier remained, but their shared love and mutual respect provided a foundation strong enough to weather any storm. Through simple daily routines, small joys, and moments of quiet understanding, they created a life full of meaning and fulfillment. One quiet evening, after a long day of work, they sat on the porch of the cabin, watching the stars appear one by one. The prairie stretched endlessly before them, peaceful and still. Mei Ling leaned against Jack, feeling a sense of belonging and love she had never known before. Jack held her gently, grateful for the journey that had brought them together. The whispered words of earlier months, the stolen glances, the shared hardships all had led to this moment of quiet contentment. As night fell over the prairie, Mei Ling and Jack reflected on how far they had come. They had faced loneliness, cultural barriers, social judgment, and the harshness of frontier life. Yet, through it all, they had discovered that love, trust, and companionship could flourish even in the most difficult circumstances. Their story was not one of grand romance or dramatic declarations, but of two people who had grown together, learning to rely on one another and finding joy in the simple moments of life. In the years that followed, Mei Ling and Jack continued to build their life together. The ranch prospered, the town grew, and their bond remained steadfast. They faced new challenges, as all lives do, but they faced them with courage and unity. Mei Ling's resilience, intelligence, and kindness complemented Jack's strength, wisdom, and quiet determination. Together, they created a home filled with warmth, respect, and enduring love. And so, the story of Mei Ling and Jack ended not with dramatic events, but with a life built on trust, shared experiences, and the quiet beauty of human connection. From the first timid encounters to the whispered moments of understanding, they had found each other in a world that had seemed vast, lonely, and unfamiliar. Their love was a testament to the power of patience, courage, and the simple act of being present for one another. On a calm summer night, as the wind rustled through the grass and the stars shone brightly overhead, Mei Ling and Jack sat together on the porch, content and at peace. Their journey had been long and filled with trials, but they had discovered something far greater than either had imagined. A true partnership, built on respect, trust, and unwavering affection. The frontier had tested them, the town had watched, and through it all, they had found not just survival, but a life rich with love and meaning.